It was supposed to be an ordinary Saturday morning. The kind where the sun slants in gently through the blinds, the air smells faintly of freshly cut grass, and the world feels slow enough for you to breathe. I had been up early sipping my coffee on the front porch, trying to shake off the weariness that clung to me after another long week of double shifts. The neighborhood was still quiet, except for the distant hum of a lawnmower and the occasional chirp of a bird. I had lived here for just under 6 months, and while it wasn't exactly home, yet it was the first place in years that had felt safe. The HOA rules were strict, but I kept to myself, paid my dues on time, and stayed out of trouble. Or so I thought. That illusion shattered the moment I hit the button to open my garage door. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us why compassion matters, please take a second right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Kindness Corner so we can keep telling these powerful, real-life stories. The door groaned as it rolled upward, revealing the gleaming red 1969 Camaro SS I'd been painstakingly restoring for months. It had been my father's pride and joy before his sudden passing 2 years ago. When I inherited it, the car was in rough shape, dented panels, faded paint, engine barely holding on. But it wasn't just a car to me, it was the last piece of him I could still touch. Every spare dollar, every free evening had gone into bringing it back to life. That morning was special because, for the first time, it was truly finished. Fresh coat of paint that glowed like liquid fire, chrome polished to a mirror's shine, engine roaring like it had just rolled off the assembly line. I stood there, soaking it in, heart swelling with pride and a bittersweet ache. That's when I heard the voice. It was sharp, cutting through the calm like a blade. I turned to see her, Linda, the HOA president, though most neighbors called her something else behind closed doors. She stood across the street in a spotless white tracksuit, clutching her phone like a weapon. Her eyes locked onto the Camaro, and a storm gathered on her face. Without so much as a greeting, she started shouting, "That's my car! You stole it!" At first, I actually laughed, thinking it was some bizarre joke. But her voice grew louder, her accusations more venomous, and my smile faded. She was deadly serious. Before I could even process it, she was on the phone with 911, breathlessly claiming she had just caught a man in the act of stealing her brand new purchase. My stomach twisted into knots. I knew how it would look. Me, a guy with grease, stained hands and worn work boots, standing beside a muscle car that was, admittedly, the kind of thing that would turn heads. I could already see the narrative forming in her mind. She, the wealthy, respected community leader. Me, the outsider, the suspicious neighbor with no family around to vouch for me. Within minutes, 2 squad cars pulled up. The officers stepped out, hands resting near their holsters, scanning the scene. Linda's voice carried as she launched into her performance, complete with fake tears and shaky hands. She claimed she had ordered a similar car just weeks ago, that it had been stolen before delivery, and now, miraculously, it was in my garage. Standing there, I felt my chest tighten, not just from the fear of being arrested, but from the injustice of it all. My father's car, my months of hard work, my memories, my grief, my healing, all under attack in a single absurd accusation. The officers approached, one of them asking for my ID while the other examined the car. Linda hovered nearby, arms crossed, radiating smug certainty. I explained everything: the inheritance, the restoration, the receipts for parts, even old photos of the car in its rusted, half-broken state. But in her eyes, every word I spoke was just another lie. The tension was thick, neighbors beginning to gather on sidewalks, drawn by the flashing lights. Whispers spread like wildfire. I could feel my reputation unraveling in real time, threads pulling apart with each passing second. I wanted to scream, to demand they believe me, but years of working in jobs where shouting back never helped taught me to stay calm. The officers radioed in my information, stepping aside to discuss something quietly. That's when fate decided to twist the knife. A tow truck rolled down the street. My stomach dropped as Linda's face lit up. She had actually called for it, confident they'd impound her car before the end of the hour. I stood frozen, helpless, watching the driver back into my driveway. But just as he was about to hook up the Camaro, one of the officers raised his hand to stop him. The other had been scrolling through his tablet, reviewing the VIN number I'd given them. He turned the screen toward Linda, his voice calm but firm. The records matched perfectly. Not to her, not to any recent sale, but to my late father, registered, insured, and legally mine. For a heartbeat, the street went silent. The neighbors stared, the tow truck idled, and Linda's mouth opened but no sound came out. She tried to stammer something about a mix-up, about how looked just like the one she'd ordered. But the damage was already done, not to me, but to her carefully cultivated image. The officers told her, in no uncertain terms, that making false claims could carry serious consequences. She turned away, muttering about needing to check with her dealership, and all but ran back to her house. I stood there, trembling, not from fear anymore, but from the adrenaline crash and the weight of what had almost happened. One misunderstanding, one person's spite, and I could have lost not just my father's car, but my freedom. The officers, perhaps sensing the depth of my relief, stayed a moment longer to reassure me. As they left, the neighbors began to drift away too, some offering apologetic nods, others avoiding my gaze entirely. That evening I sat in the garage with the Camaro, the engine off, the fading sunset reflecting off its hood. I thought about how quickly life can tilt, how fragile our stability really is when someone decides to tear it down. And I thought about my father. How proud he would have been to see the car alive again, how furious he would have been at the false accusation, but also how he would have told me to hold my head high and let the truth do its work. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and share it so others can hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to Kindness Corner so we can keep sharing these real, powerful moments that remind us why empathy matters more than ever. Later that night, long after the street had gone quiet, I found myself sitting in the driver's seat with the garage door closed, my hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. The leather was worn smooth from decades of use, but it still carried the faint scent of my father's cologne. I thought about all the memories this car had seen. Late night drives with him teaching me about engines, the way he'd grin whenever he'd hit the perfect gear shift, the sound of his laughter above the roar of the motor. Losing him had left a hole in my life I didn't think could ever be filled, but working on this car had been my way of keeping him close. That's why Linda's accusation had cut so deep. It wasn't just about the car. It was about someone trying to rip away one of the last pieces of my family. I realized then that some people will judge you without knowing your story, and others will stand quietly beside you, believing in you even when they don't have to. Those officers didn't know me, but they listened. That's all it took to stop an injustice from becoming a tragedy. I wish more people understood how much damage can be done in just a few words spoken in anger or spite, and how much healing can happen when someone chooses patience instead. As I turned off the lights in the garage and headed inside, I made a promise to myself, no matter how bitter someone else might be, I would never let them change who I am. My father always said, hold on to the truth and you'll never lose. That night, I understood exactly what he meant. Before we end, I have a special request. Comment below what you would have done if you were in my shoes that day. I'll be reading every single one.